As I look back on my career when I was promoting, I've explained this many times, but I knew that if I was going to do a school or if I was going to do a big lecture in a big city, I had to fish the closest big impoundment. I had to fish their lake, bottom line, and have a lot of success on their lake to develop the interest to get people to come to hear the message about structure fishing. I had to do that. So the number one guy to call, of course, was the writer of the newspaper. He had the biggest pool by his articles in the outdoor section of the paper. On Sundays, I always have a big full page. So he was the guy to get a hold of and challenged. Come out with me. Take me to your reservoir out here, and we'll be catching fish in the first hour. Guarantee it. And they would come. And if I couldn't get a writer in an area, I would personally go around until I found the biggest tackle dealer in the city. And then I'd make him the same offer. I want to take you fishing. And I guarantee you, 1 hour we'll be catching fish. How in the world could I do that? How did I get away with that for years? Because we have the weather and water conditions and all the things we talked about before that I had to contend with. But how did I get away with it? I'm going to tell you how. When I would challenge one of these guys, in many cases back in the day, there were not any places where I could go and get a contour map of that reservoir. I had to go sort of, quote, blind. Many times I'd give them a choice. They'd always pick that big impoundment, that nobody's catching fish on in the summer months. They'd always choose that, which was good for me. Because I knew I really didn't need a contour map. I knew there was a dam on that reservoir, and I would get a road map and search out and find out if there were any causeways. And in my observation of terrain, I'd always be on the lookout for maybe where an old road came in, and then I could establish and find a road bed, which is what happened to me in Lake Arlington when I did that great promotion. I saw it, and then I let my depth sounder do the rest of the work. And it still today ranks as the number one catch of mine with a writer, consecutive cast on largemouth bass. Little Lake Arlington, Little Flatland. But at any rate, here's the reason that I loved these Flatland 2s, and I could go and win my bet with that writer every time. Follow along with me while I give you the reason that these man-made structures are the key. First, I can visibly see a dam and a causeway. Don't need a contour map. I can see it, and I can go right to it. Not only is it available for me to locate without a contour map, but I already know it's clean and workable structure. I know it'll produce, it leads to the channel, leads all the way. I know automatically these two structures will produce fish. Guaranteed, for sure, absolutely. And then I know, because of how these structures were built, that the whole area around these structures was clear cut. So it's not only productive structure, easy to find and productive, but it's workable. I can work it. I can keep my lure working, knowing that I'm fishing productive structure, free of hangs, for the most part, free of hangs. I'm not going to get hung up. I'm going to keep fishing. I'm going to keep that lure fishing. So on top of that, let's go to the fourth advantage that these spots had. In most all cases, the dam is offering you some lee from the wind. Unless, there was one time I was taking a rider, it was actually in Texas, it was grapevine. Crossing the dam, that wind was blowing straight down that lake. I mean, blowing right into that dam, and there's 4 or 5 foot waves. And that's when I begged the guy to find me some little smaller reservoir somewhere we might be able to fish, and that's when he took me to Lake Arlington. Turned out to be the greatest promotion ever. Something like 1,300 people at the show as a result of it. 1,300 people at the show in Dallas, and the next night was like 1,100 people at the show over in Fort Worth. All from fishing a man-made structure on Little Lake Arlington. But in that case, it was the wind that drove me away from grapevine, because I didn't have a contour map of it, but I could see that wind coming straight down that lake. It was not pretty sight, I knew that I wasn't going to be able to fish. But in most all cases, your Flatland 2 reservoir, if you have a chance to do some interpretation, start interpreting, and not only can I find it, but is it clear cut? Is it productive? Is it clean, workable structure? And where am I going to be able to fish? Which ones am I going to be able to fish under certain wind conditions, which is bound to happen in a Flatland 2? If I'm living on Tawakoni, or if I'm living on Texoma or Texarkana, if I'm living on any of those big old flatlands, Rend Lake out in Illinois, which I did a great promotion on that causeway, by the way. I think it was Route 163. Go look it up. Go fish it. South side. At any rate, it didn't matter. I knew I could catch fish. I could make that statement. I guarantee you we'll catch fish. And I just go to the dam, go to the causeway. If I could find roadbed, underwater, railroad grade, when I did have a map, I'd fish them. And always was successful. Always. So if you're looking at a Flatland 2 reservoir, that's what you're fishing. Sure, you can go out and work out those two-sided bars. Might be 2 miles out in the lake. And I can promise you, when you find that spot and anchor down on that flat and fan cast that spot, I can promise you there won't be anybody else there. You'll have that spot to yourself, I can promise you. So, do I want to work the entire lake out? If it's my lakes, you bet. I want to find all of those junctions. I want to find all those two-sided bars. I want to find the best one that's breaking the best and has the deepest water in the lake right off of it, and so on and so forth. I want to do all that. But if I had to produce a fish, which I always did, and I didn't have, in most all cases, I only had a day. Some cases, I only had half a day. I had to produce. I couldn't be worried about getting hung up and trying to get lures off. I couldn't worry about trying to find a contour map. What I knew was that if I was fishing a Flatland 2 reservoir, I'm going to go fish the dam, I'm going to fish the causeway, and I'm going to catch fish. Guaranteed. Guaranteed. All I needed was a handful of spoon plugs and a trolling rod, because most of those structures are trolling water. Now, once you've located a group of fish, you stop and cast. But locating those fish on those structures, I'm telling you, folks, you got to believe me when I tell you, it's like taking candy from a baby. It's guaranteed. It's easy. So when you look at that 100,000 acres, had a guy hire me one time to map a 200,000 acre reservoir. He actually hired me to do that. I X'd off so many places. I told him I'm going to do it in 3 days. Which I did. But you got to cut that reservoir down to size. You can't be where that first slide I showed you, where all those flats are for a mile or two heading out in there, and then there's the channel. There's my fish. I've got to find those structures that lead all the way. And most of those big flatlands, that lower end of the reservoir, you got to go 2-3 miles to get to the channel. It's difficult to pinpoint your fish. You can do it, but it's so much easier. Just go to your man-made stuff and start fishing. Clean, workable. When Buck says, get out of the trees, that's what he's talking about. Get on that dam, get on that causeway, get on that roadbed, get on that railroad grade. And you don't have to ever do any more than that. You're going to be catching the fish. I promise you, you will. Okay, so that about wraps up our discussion of the Flatland 2 reservoir, but let me just share this with you. Of all the lectures and the clinics that I've done over the years, many times guys will say to me, what's your favorite reservoir to fish? Well, to be honest, I love fishing all of them. Probably the biggest challenge is a gin clear highland reservoir. Probably the canyon type lakes out west. Biggest challenge. And I've always loved a challenge. So I enjoy fishing highlands. And I love a great old lowland number 1. I mean, that's just a pleasure to fish. But I can honestly say that fishing a Flatland 2, one of my favorite places to go fishing. Many times, the areas where I'm finding fish in the Flatland 2, I never see a fisherman. I never see anybody else fishing where I'm fishing. Occasionally, you'll see a boat or two at the dam, but they're not working it properly, obviously. Uh, and occasionally you might see a boat at the causeway, but again, not working it properly. But the underwater road beds, the underwater railroad gauge, you'll absolutely never see another fisherman fishing those areas. You can have these spots to yourself. Two-sided bar out in the middle of that big old flatland. You have that spot to yourself. So in a way, I kind of really like fishing the flatland twos. And as I look over my career, the promotional side of my career, without question, the biggest catches that created the most stir always came from one of these big flatland 2 impoundments, where in the early days of that reservoir, there was fish all over the place. People were catching fish, but once those fish became acclimated to that reservoir and took up housekeeping in that channel, the writers will they all told me the same thing. Well, it used to be good, but no one's caught a fish there in 2 years. I mean, there's just fishing's lousy. My old friend Jack Harrisman told me that about Rend Lake. And I went down to that causeway without a contour map, and within a half a day we had caught 50 or 55 bass, including he had his first fish weighed 5 pounds. And he told me, and he has his ear to the ground, this guy, he knew everything was going on in Illinois, literally, in the outdoor arena. He knew what was going on. He said that fishing hole, Rend Lake, is dead. There's nobody catching any bass whatsoever. 55 bass in the morning of fishing. And my big secret was going to a causeway. Enough said, right? I'm telling you, you can become a hero on your Flatland 2 reservoir if you fish the man-made structure. I'm sure by now you've got the idea, but I'm going to give you the 4 reasons why you need to pinpoint your fish in a Flatland 2 reservoir and spend most all your time fishing man-made structure. First, these structures are easy to locate. Dam, causeway, easy to find. 2, we know they will produce fish. It leads all the way from the shallows to the deep, to the home of the fish. And for a structure to produce, it has to lead all the way. But we already know these automatically do that. And thirdly, when the reservoir was being built, they clear-cut these areas. There are no trees, there's no stumps. It's clean, workable structure. And lastly, when the wind comes up, both of these areas of the dam and the causeway can offer you lee water that you can be working during a windy condition. And you should also make sure that you're looking at the big feeder stream cuts that come in, where you might be able to get on the north side or the south side, depending on where the wind's coming from, and get a little lee water there. But my main key has always been and will always remain to be, for the reasons I just gave you, when fishing a Flatland 2 reservoir, go to the man-made structure and you'll start catching fish. I promise you, I guarantee it. Okay. All that being said, thanks for being with me today. I hope you learned a little something. I want you to be sure to like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and be sure to subscribe to our channel here if you haven't already done it. Thanks for being with me today, and we'll see you the next time.